Hello, I'm Reverend Daryl Gene Motal, the paranormal preacher and pastor of the Paranormal Church. And today, the Paranormal Church is going to be interviewing Zach. And Zach is a Satanist. He's been a Satanist for many, many years. And what we're going to talk to Zach about is what he feels and how he feels about what's going on with the current resurrection of the satanic ritual abuse myths. And so, Zach, how you doing today?
Good, thank you, Reverend.
Okay, well, we'll go ahead and get right into it. I'm going to go ahead and get to the first question. Please tell our listening audience how you became a Satanist and why.
Well, let's see. I think I was about 13. I was in middle school, and I had an older friend I used to pal around with, and he used to carry around a satanic Bible. And it was intriguing, and eventually I read it, and it made a lot of sense to me. And I joined the Church of Satan when I was 18.
So how many years has that been now?
About 14, almost 15 years now.
So what parts made sense to you?
Well, by the time I was 13, I was already having a hard time believing in God and the devil and heaven and hell, as Christians would see it. And when I read the Satanic Bible, it was appealing to me that Satanists don't actually believe in a God or a devil, and they just use the name Satan to be more of a symbolic representation of man's carnality and fleshly pursuits, and to show its opposition towards Christianity and organized religion. It had nothing to do with worshiping the devil or being evil or harming children or animals or anything that the modern hysteria might say about Satanism.
See, that's a very interesting point, because I was reading some transcripts on the internet by Ted Gunderson. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he's one of these so-called cult crime experts.
Oh, Jesus, I'm sure.
And there was this one case where a woman died in a car crash because somebody else hit her head on. And the first thing he does is he's just spews out some lies and nonsense misrepresenting Satanism. He says the driver of the other car that hit the lady had a criminal record of animal abuse. And so therefore, we all know that people who've hurt animals eventually become Satanists. And then he says, as a Satanist, the devil will give him a reward by letting him be reincarnated with more power and more money in another life if he has a murder-suicide pact with the devil to take out this person who's trying to, blow the whistle about the Satanists. And I read that and I said, oh, come on. I know Satanists don't believe in the devil. They don't believe in God. They don't believe in the afterlife, so you don't believe in reincarnation. Am I correct in saying this?
You're absolutely right. And in fact, on page 89 of the Satanic Bible, it says very clearly, under no circumstances would a Satanist ever harm a child or an animal.
All right, so again, that's what we're talking about, perpetuating the myths. If these people would just stick with the facts, maybe they could... The thing that sickens me the most is if there is somebody raping children, or there's pedophiles in the government or something like that's going on, I can believe that that's happening. So let's stick with the facts, get credible witnesses, and find out who's actually doing what. But the minute you start putting aliens and satanic conspiracies and all this other nonsense in there, you actually ruin any chance of getting into conviction, and this stuff gets thrown out of court. But when it gets thrown out of court, the people cry, oh, the police are involved, the lawyers are involved, everybody's involved, and it's a cover-up. I'm going to read something to you about Bob Larson, and then I'm going to let you respond to that. You see, it starts out with people like Alex Jones. They're resurrecting these conspiracy theories on the radio. A lot of people are on the internet popping it up. This stuff died in the early 90s, but it's coming back. Bob Larson, to me, is one of the biggest threats right now, because in just a few days, he's going to start a new reality show called The Real Exorcist. And he's doing fake exorcisms, and he's putting it on TV. But one of his star programs, I think the last episode that he filmed, he has a lady who's famous, who's a gymnast, and he claims that she was a victim of satanic ritual abuse. And so on his website right now for September, he has a newsletter saying, we are facing an emergency. And he turns around and he tells the people that even though we've done all this great work, you haven't been there for us to give money. We really need your money now because we're fighting Satan and his hordes of demons. And then I'm going to read a direct quote from this. He says, recently Laura and I were in Los Angeles shooting a final episode for our new TV reality show, The Real Exorcist. It premieres October 30th, 7 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the Sci-Fi Channel. When this episode hits national TV, it's going to shake up the church. We ministered to a former world-class gymnast who was the victim of a satanic cult. As a child, she was put through vile ceremonies, was forced to eat, sacrificed human babies, and drink their blood. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, that story just sounds utterly ridiculous. I mean, it sounds like something out of Hollywood. I mean, I know at least a dozen members of the Church of Satan, and nobody does that. No one is like that. And the people that he's describing, I mean, I doubt that actually even happened, but if something like that ever did happen, that's someone of a criminal mind, someone who is sick and mentally ill. It's not a Satanist. It actually kind of reminds me a little bit of the Nazi propaganda when they used to talk about the Jews drinking blood and eating babies and stuff like that too. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I was watching some videos on one of the other shows that had Bob Larson on it, and this woman stood up, and this is going to really scare you. This woman stood up and said that she had been through more than 50 exorcisms through Bob Larson and his people. Okay, and then she found out that she was, she found out through the ministry and through their treatment, however you want to call it, that she was also a victim of a satanic cult, and including the baby eating, the blood drinking, and all that. And the scariest part was, now she wants to become a preacher, exorcist, and go help other people. Well, the problem with that is, she never was a satanic victim. She has been brainwashed, and her mind's been diluted by Larson and his people, and now she's going to become a therapist/exorcist. Now, if you get a therapist-exorcist who's full of mental illness, who's been through 50 exorcisms, who believes in all this myth, and now that person gets a hold of Joe Christian's daughter, because, she's a therapist, you don't know what her background is. You send Joe sends his daughter to this woman. Well, of course, she's going to project all her fears and her insanity on that kid, and next thing you know, Joe's going to find out that people are accusing him of subjecting his daughter to satanic abuse, and it just goes on and goes on and goes on, and people's lives are ruined. And, they're accusing presidents, vice presidents, they might as well be accusing the Mickey Mouse Club. It's just really ridiculous.
Yeah, I'm not a big George Bush fan, but I think it's just absurd to say that he's involved in any sort of government satanic conspiracy or any evil Illuminati, New World Order. I mean, that's just all absurd. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
So as far as Larson's little newsletter, I know I'd send a copy to you for you to read. Do you think that this woman's telling there's any truth to the eating of the babies, or do you think that Larson's using sensationalism and guilt and manipulation to try to raise money?
Oh, no, I don't give Bob Larson any credit whatsoever. I mean, it's obvious he's just using sensationalism to fill his bank account and to pay his mortgage. I mean, after all, he doesn't need a scapegoat to rally against if he's going to keep asking people for money. And in fact, in the late 80s, early 90s, the FBI did a pretty thorough investigation into these alleged satanic ritual abuse. And they concluded that it was unfounded and that there was no evidence to support any of these sensationalistic claims.
Yeah, actually the guy that headed it up, his name was Kenneth Lanning, and in 1992 he did a very thorough job, and I read the report, and it makes a lot of sense. But then again, here we are having to face this all over again.
Well, that lady you mentioned earlier, it just sounds like she's probably mentally ill and suffers from schizophrenia.
And that's the sad thing. That is the sad thing. And I don't know if you've listened to some of the other videos, interviews I've done, but I've interviewed women who have met Larson, who just had some emotional problems, or maybe they had a paranormal event and they didn't understand it. So by the time they went to Larson, all of a sudden Larson's got them thinking that their dad, who was a preacher, was molesting them, okay, and doing all kinds of things to them, and witchcraft and demons and ancestral curses and stuff that they never remembered, never thought of, never once entered their mind before they met Larson. So that tells you how much of this stuff is fabricated. So another thing is once I started trying to do a counter ministry, because there's so many people spreading the lies, the minute I try to bring some common sense and some good biblical counsel, and I know you're not a Christian, but when I say good biblical counsel, I'm talking about a message of love and not fear, trying to get people to have good morality and care, not go around calling people devil worshipping nuts. The minute I start doing that, I get emails, people telling me I'm a Satanist, I'm a baby killer, or here's one of my favorites, are you a CIA operative? So I'm going to ask you, because that's what they do. Anytime somebody tries to refute what they're saying, the first thing they do is accuse you of being a Satanist, which you already are, but now they're accusing me of being a CIA agent.
No, Reverend, I'm not a CIA agent or an FBI agent, or I have no military or government affiliations of any sort. But speaking of covert affiliations, here's a picture of Bob Larson with the high priest of the Church of Satan, Peter Gilmore, taken back sometime in the early 90s. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions about that one.
Well, that brings us to the end of part 1. I hope you'll stick around.